In April of 2024, deputies in Glade County, Florida, began canvassing an area near a home in Lakeport after receiving a report about a stolen John Deere Gator and a boat. In an apparent effort to evade law enforcement, 33-year-old Joshua Kolotka was seen leaving the residence disguised as a woman. But the blue dress, white cardigan and blonde wig that he was wearing did not fool the police, who arrested him at the scene. While searching the property, police found multiple other suspected stolen items. Glade County jail records show that Kolotka is what one might call a frequent flyer at the facility, with at least 19 visits since 2012. Past charges include larceny, burglary, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, arson, trespassing, loitering, probation violations, dealing in stolen property, resisting arrest, and multiple warrants for crimes in other counties. Kolotka also served prison time in 2013 for burglary and theft, and again in 2023 for grand theft and criminal mischief. The accused thief is currently detained without bail for the stolen vehicles and 2 out-of-county warrants. Number 37. Nathan Chacon. An ordinary afternoon at the Grand Junction police station in Colorado took a dramatic turn in January of 2023 when a Chevy Silverado pickup truck plowed through the building's glass doors. The vehicle rammed into a counter inside the lobby, which thankfully prevented it from traveling into the building's offices, where 11 employees were working at the time. Officers rushed into the lobby with their guns drawn and swiftly apprehended the driver, 45-year-old Nathan David Chacon, who is no stranger to law enforcement. In the handful of years leading up to the incident, police had received upwards of 90 calls involving the suspect, who reported strange happenings that have been unfounded. In the days before the crash, Chacon called the police multiple times for reasons that were not explained in court documents. During the conversations, he swore at officers and hung up the phone in a noticeably agitated state. After determining that Chacon did not need medical attention, police put him in a holding cell. He told officers that he believed he was being followed by several vehicles and confessed to purposely crashing his truck into the station in an effort to prevent his pursuers from killing him. Chacon also admitted that it was a dumb decision, but said that he felt it was necessary in order to be heard. Prosecutors charged Chacon with 6 counts, including attempted murder, attempted assault, attempted vehicular assault, criminal mischief, and reckless endangerment. In October 2023, he pleaded guilty to criminal mischief and second-degree assault in exchange for the other 4 other charges being dropped. Chacon is serving a 15-year prison sentence for his crimes and will become eligible for parole in 2030. Number 36. Gino Colin Acosta. Polk County, Florida Sheriff Grady Judd is famously blunt when it comes to sharing his thoughts about dumb criminals. In keeping with this tendency, he didn't mince words when he announced the arrest of a father and son who opened fire on an innocent civilian outside their Winter Haven apartment complex in October of 2022. The incident began when a delivery person left a package of medicine at the wrong apartment. When the man who lived there noticed the package, he walked it over to the correct unit, triggering a Ring doorbell camera outside the home of 73-year-old Gino Colin Acosta and his teenage son, Rocky. Suspecting that the man was lurking with the intent to burglarize their home, Gino and Rocky went outside with loaded semi-automatic handguns and began searching for the suspected intruder. In the parking lot, Gino spotted an idling car with tinted windows and mistakenly assumed that the driver must be the imaginary burglar. In reality, the car belonged to a woman who was arriving home from work. According to deputies, Gino ordered the driver, 33-year-old Gladybell Cordill, to exit the vehicle. Noticing he had a gun and believing she was being carjacked, Cordill threw the vehicle in reverse and stepped on the gas in an panicked attempt to get away from him, causing her to accidentally crash into the car behind her. Meanwhile, Rocky overheard his father's yelling and allegedly opened fire on the vehicle in an attempt to shoot out one of the woman's tires and prevent her from leaving the scene. She got away and drove to a nearby convenience store where she called 911. The Colin Acostas also called law enforcement after having 7 shots fired at her car, with 1 bullet striking a child's seat and then lodging itself into the driver's seat. Cordill was lucky to be alive and uninjured, describing the colon accosters as way out of line and really, really stupid. Sheriff Judd expressed his desire for both suspects to languish behind bars. The pair faced a litany of charges, including attempted murder, attempts, solicitation and conspiracy, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, culpable negligence, and discharging a firearm in public or on residential property. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 35. Angelina Quirion and Adam Jalbert. In January of 2022, 39-year-old Angelina Quirion and 33-year-old Adam Jalbert tried bailing a friend out of the Androscoggin County Jail in southern Maine with counterfeit money. While searching their car, police found a handgun and hundreds of grams of cocaine, cocaine base, fentanyl, and methamphetamine during a search of Quirion's home in Bangor the following day. Agents with Maine's Drug Enforcement Agency seized 2 pounds of fentanyl, nearly 2 pounds of methamphetamine, 3 guns, and $30,000 in suspected drug proceeds. Based on the total amount of contraband seized throughout the investigation, it was one of the largest drug busts in state history. Quirion, who had no prior felonies, was charged with and convicted of multiple aggravated drug trafficking-related crimes. In October of 2023, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison with all but 5 years suspended, followed by 4 years of probation, amounting to a 25-year prison term and marking one of the most significant drug-related sentences ever imposed in the state of Maine. Jalbert was also convicted of multiple aggravated drug trafficking counts and is serving a 7-year prison sentence, which will be followed by 4 years of probation. Number 34. Angela Killian. In September of 2023, 44-year-old Angela Killian was banned from boarding a Bogota-bound flight at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport after the captain overheard her verbally abusing flight attendants. Police responded to the scene after receiving reports from American Airlines employees who accused Killian of acting aggressive and belligerent when they refused to let her onto the plane. During a conversation with an officer, Killian broke down in tears while admitting that she drank 2 very full vodka tonics, an amount that she claimed was customary for her to drink while traveling. She admitted that she wasn't sober, but denied being as drunk as the airline staff and police seemed to think she was. Officers detained Killian while reassuring her that she wasn't under arrest, but she became increasingly hostile as she repeatedly demanded an opportunity to contact her lawyer. As her behavior escalated, the police changed their minds and decided to place her under arrest, at which point she lashed out in a half-coherent fit of rage. She continued to berate the officers as she refused to cooperate and urinated her pants, giving the police no choice but to carry her until she was willing to walk. Killian was charged with resisting arrest and public intoxication. Following her arrest, she lost her job as a customer experience manager for Capital One. Her former co-workers told the Daily Mail that Killian had a reputation for drinking heavily and acting belligerent on business trips, but a Capital One spokesperson declined to comment on the matter. According to the most recent updates on Killian's criminal case, she has yet to enter a plea to the charges. Number 33. Lily Rinker. While responding to a call at a Best Western Hotel in Stuart, Florida, early one morning in November 2023, police were met by 23-year-old college golfer Lily Rinker, who accused her friend, Carlos, of stealing some of her marijuana. She had known Carlos for about a week and had noticed the $5 worth of missing pot after he left the room, prompting her to dial 911 to report the suspected theft. While running Rinker's ID, police discovered that she had a pair of outstanding arrest warrants out of Palm Beach County for failing to appear in court for 2 separate cases, including an outstanding criminal mischief case and a probation violation stemming from a DUI case. Rinker had also been arrested in 2022 for allegedly hitting her father in the face, but prosecutors declined to pursue charges in that case. Rinka was taken into custody for the outstanding warrants, but it's unclear whether she was charged for possessing marijuana, which is illegal in the state of Florida. Number 32. Kyra Enders and Dakota Jones. In March of 2024, a Florida couple tried to trick lottery officials into awarding them $1 million prize using halves of two different $50 scratch-off tickets that were pieced together to form a winning ticket. Escambia County deputies described the mismatching pieces as crudely taped together and laminated to conceal the alterations. Identified by authorities as 36-year-old Kyra Enders and 32-year-old Dakota Jones of Defuniak Springs, the suspects apparently didn't realize that the ticket halves featured different serial numbers, making it easy for officials to identify their prize claim as fraudulent. When Enders called the Florida Lottery to check on the status of her claim, an agent told her to meet him in Pensacola to go over some paperwork. Upon arriving at the meeting, Enders and Jones were separated and taken into custody for questioning. According to law enforcement, Enders claimed that the ticket ripped because she tried to scratch it off after it fell out of her car and got rained on. She said she mailed the ticket to the Florida Lottery after it failed to scan at 3 different stores and acted surprised when confronted about the mismatching serial numbers. Jones reportedly told the lottery agent that he and Enders found the 2 ticket halves lying 50 yards apart on the ground while walking along a roadside. A police report states that Jones seemed to acknowledge that Enders knew the halves didn't go together before quickly backtracking and claiming that they thought the ticket was legitimate. Enders and Jones are each charged with presenting a forged state lottery ticket, forging a lottery ticket with the intent to defraud, and grand theft of $100,000 or more. Each forgery count carries a maximum state prison sentence of 5 years, while the pair could face up to 30 years in prison if convicted of the grand theft charge. Number 31. Sarah Harris. In January of 2024, 34-year-old Sarah Harris of Lawrence County, Indiana, was accused of dialing 911 twice in one night because she believed she had purchased a bad batch of methamphetamine. Nobody responded when dispatchers answered the phone, so they sent a deputy to Harris's residence. According to an arrest affidavit, Harris told Captain Andrew Phillips that someone had given her bad meth the previous day, causing her to feel like she was having a heart attack. She admitted to knowing that the drug was illegal, but said she wanted to press charges against the person she obtained the supply from. After being advised of her right to end the conversation at any time, Harris explained that she had smoked a bowl of normal meth with the person who gave her the bad drugs and took a supply home with her. When she snorted a line of the meth at her residence, she began feeling extremely dizzy and like she had to stand up in order to prevent her heart from stopping. Phillips tested the stash at Harris's request, and it turned out to be normal, run-of-the-mill methamphetamine. Harris was charged with possession, adding to a lengthy criminal history which includes prior convictions for theft, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, resisting, operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated, and methamphetamine possession. If convicted on the possession charge, she could spend up to 30 months behind bars. Number 30. Matthew Lashinsky. In June of 2023, 23-year-old Matthew Lashinsky dialed 911 at 3:30 in the morning to report a burglary at his place of business on Long Island in New York. Upon arriving at the location in Ronkonkoma, which operated under the name Quantitative Laboratories LLC, Suffolk County Police began to suspect that it was no ordinary scientific lab. Further investigation revealed that the business was manufacturing methamphetamine and other illegal drugs, including the hallucinogen dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. Detectives seized more than 100 pieces of equipment commonly associated with the meth manufacturing process, along with chemical agents that are typically used to produce the drug. They also found $40,000 in cash, over 3 ounces of meth, a large amount of pure ketamine, an ecstasy stash, and 2 large drums of the assault drug GHB. If Lashinsky hadn't called the police to report the suspected break-in, law enforcement may have never discovered what Suffolk County District Attorney Raymond Tierney described as a Breaking Bad-style drug lab. Lashinsky's defense attorney, David Besso, told Newsday that there was no evidence that his client ever sold drugs out of his laboratory. Besso claimed that Lashinsky was researching drug addiction and that he had applied for the proper permits to manufacture the drugs he needed for the project, but hadn't obtained the documents yet. Lashinsky ultimately pleaded guilty to 13 charges, including 9 drug-related felonies and a handful of similar misdemeanors, as well as a reckless endangerment charge. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Number 29. Jose Guadalupe Perez Gallardo. After noticing a hole cut into the fencing around his plumbing store in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and discovering surveillance footage of a man stealing tools one night in December of 2023, the business owner called 911 to report a suspected burglary. Upon arriving at the scene, officers noticed an Uber waiting nearby. The driver told the police that he was waiting for a customer named Jose, who was walking toward the car. Officers stopped the man, who was clad in dark clothing and a pulled-down balaclava, and asked him if he was waiting for an Uber. He said no and claimed that his name was Raul, while nervously stuffing his hands in his pockets and stepping backward. The man claimed he was on his way to his mother's house and denied being Jose, even after being told that he matched the suspected thief's description. He also wasn't carrying any ID to prove whether or not he was telling the truth. During a search of the suspect's backpack, police found $8,600 worth of stolen tools. They arrested the man, who was identified through fingerprints as 26-year-old Jose Guadalupe Perez Gallardo. The accused thief was charged with multiple crimes, including larceny, criminal trespass, and possession of burglary tools. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of the case unclear. Number 28. Ziama Johnson. An on-the-run fugitive practically handed herself over to law enforcement in October of 2023 when she applied to work as a security guard for the Hudson County Sheriff's Office in New Jersey. 27-year-old former postal worker Ziama Johnson was wanted for failing to appear in court on a fraud case in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, and had 10 bench warrants for failing to appear in court for traffic tickets out of Jersey City. After confirming that the warrants were active, the agency called Johnson in for what she thought would be a job interview. Instead, she was arrested on the outstanding warrants and booked on a theft charge for 2 suspected stolen credit cards that police found in her possession while searching her belongings. Johnson was extradited to Pennsylvania to face justice in the fraud case, but was back in New Jersey just 3 months later. In April 2024, federal authorities charged her with burglarizing 2 post offices in Jersey City over a month-long span starting in January of 2023. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Johnson had electronic access to the post offices despite having been fired from her job with the Postal Service. Surveillance footage of the burglaries appeared to show her stealing boxes of mail and driving off. In addition to the mail theft, police found 38 debit and credit cards belonging to 36 people inside Johnson's car when they arrested her for her 6th suspected burglary. A search of her phone turned up evidence that she was trying to sell the cards for $50 to $300 apiece. Johnson is facing 6 counts of burglary of a post office and remains free on a $100,000 bond. If convicted as charged, she could face a maximum 5-year prison sentence and a fine of up to $250,000 on each count, which could amount to decades behind bars. Number 27. Porch pirate loses pants while reviewing home security footage after having Amazon packages stolen off his porch. In December of 2019, a homeowner in Colorado Springs caught a more detailed glimpse of the thief than he may have wanted. In the video, the suspect could be seen approaching the residence on a motorcycle. He rushed up to the doorstep, stuffed the packages into his backpack, and began running back toward his bike as several items spilled out of the bag. As the thief scrambled to collect the items, his pants fell down to his knees and he began pulling on his underwear. The homeowner, named Paul, told Newsflare that he was initially angry about the stolen packages, which included clothing and some Christmas and birthday gifts, but after watching the video, Paul said he almost felt sad for the guy because his life clearly is not going very well for him. Despite any pity the homeowner may have felt, He described the thief's behavior as intolerable and said that he wanted the man to be caught and held accountable for his actions. Paul filed a police report but expressed doubts that the suspect would ever be identified and charged. And it appears as though he may have been right, given the lack of any news updates announcing the Porch Pirate's arrest, although it's unclear whether any arrests were made. Number 26. Epic smash and grab failure. In a hilariously botched theft attempt that was captured on video in November of 2019, a pair of male suspects rammed a stolen Nissan SUV through the window of a shopping centre in Melbourne, Australia, shortly before 4 o'clock in the morning. The driver then threw the vehicle into reverse and repeatedly backed into an ATM in an attempt to crack it open. When that failed, the thieves tied a chain that was connected to the vehicle around the ATM and tried ripping it out of the floor. This also failed, and the suspects eventually gave up and fled the scene. Despite leaving empty-handed, the men caused an estimated $100,000 in damages. Shortly after the bungled robbery, police found the stolen SUV abandoned on a dead-end street a few minutes away from the crime scene. Authorities released the security footage to the public along with an appeal for information that might help them identify the thieves, but it's unclear whether any arrests were made. Number 25. Maya Ponsetto. Dubbed the Soho Karen, Maya Ponsetto first made news headlines in December of 2020 when she falsely accused a black teenager of stealing her phone inside the lobby of the Arlo Hotel. Footage captured by the victim's father, jazz musician Keon Harold, showed Ponsetto, then 22 years old, demanding the return of her phone and screaming that she wasn't going to let the teen walk away with the device. Ponsetto could also be seen grabbing and pushing at Harold's son as he tried to get away from her, sending them both tumbling to the ground. Amid the chaos, an Uber driver found Ponsetto's phone in their car and returned it to her. Ponsetto was later charged with attempted robbery, attempted assault, attempted grand larceny, and endangering the welfare of a child. She denied that the attack was racially motivated, but ultimately pleaded guilty to a felony hate crime charge. Ponsetto was no stranger to the law. Several months prior to the incident in Soho, she and her mother, Nicole Ponsetto, were arrested following a drunken altercation with staff at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. According to police, the women refused to leave the hotel when employees attempted to kick them out. In February of 2020, both mother and daughter were arrested, but the charges against Maya were eventually dropped. In October of 2020, just a week after having her case dismissed, Maya was arrested for driving under the influence in Ventura County, California. It was her second DUI arrest, and she was captured on video throwing a tantrum as police took her into custody. Ponsetto was sentenced to 2 years of probation in the case and was ordered to complete the probation sentence and attend counseling in order to satisfy her hate crime case. Number 24. Marjorie Charles. In November of 2015, a pair of women accosted a man at a Shell gas station in Washington, D.C. Even though he made it clear that their advances were unwelcome, the incident began when the suspects, later identified as 22-year-old Ayanna Marie Knight and 23-year-old Marjorie Charles, flashed the victim while he was pumping gas. When the man went into the store, one of the women could be seen twerking against him in the checkout line while the other woman aggressively grabbed his crotch and rear end. The victim later claimed that when he told the store's employees to call the police, they just stood there and stared at him, causing him to feel humiliated. He left the store as the women followed him and drove to a nearby car wash where he dialed 911. Speaking with Fox 5, the victim said that in addition to feeling violated, he was scared because he believed the women were escorts and that men outside the store were their pimps. He was worried about the situation getting violent and the possibility of one of the parties involved having a gun. The man's suspicions about the women being escorts proved correct. According to court documents, Knight and Charles were both known to work the streets of Washington, D.C. and had even been arrested together for prostitution in the past. Knight was apprehended shortly after the incident and charged with assault. She pleaded guilty to an abuse charge and received a suspended prison sentence, along with 6 months of probation. Charles was on the run at the time of Knight's arrest, and it's unclear whether she was captured. Number 23. thief gets stuck twice in one night. In December of 2018, a thief got stuck on a spiked fence twice while trying to flee a supermarket in the Belgian province of Limburg with stolen energy drinks. He first got stuck at around 3 in the morning after trying to climb over the fence using stacked bread shelves. The occupants of a passing vehicle stopped and freed him, and he left the scene with the stolen beverages. He returned to the store at around 5 a.m. to steal beer and got stuck again as he was leaving the scene. This time, nobody stopped and helped him. The thief tried removing his pants in order to free himself, but he remained hopelessly snagged on the fence. He dangled upside down for about an hour and a half before some passerby spotted him and, instead of helping him, called the police. Officers promptly arrested the unnamed 30-year-old who was already well known to law enforcement due to his criminal history, and the beer and energy drinks were found at his house and returned to the store. Number 22. David Converse Harris. On Halloween in 2023, a man entered a bank in South Salt Lake, Utah, and handed a teller a note demanding all the money in the till and instructing the employee not to call the authorities until he left. The teller complied with the robber's demands while slipping a dye pack in with the cash that she handed over to him. Later identified as 35-year-old David Converse Harris, the suspect left the scene in a Chrysler sedan belonging to an Uber driver. The driver told investigators that he picked Harris up at a game store near the bank around the time of the robbery. While driving the accused thief to an address that was later identified as Harris's home, the driver noticed that his passenger's hands and jacket were covered in red ink and that there appeared to be smoke coming out of the man's pocket. Police found the exploded dye pack at the location where the Uber picked Harris up, but they didn't find him at his residence. A few days later, law enforcement located Harris at a motel in Midvale, Utah. When they tried to arrest him, he fled the scene in a stolen Lexus SUV. Officers initially pursued the vehicle but called off the chase for safety reasons. Later that day, a man matching Harris's description robbed a bank in Mill Creek. Using the same method as the first robbery, he could be seen approaching a teller with a note and leaving the bank with the stolen money. The following day, police spotted the stolen Lexus in Tuel County. Once again, the driver fled, sparking a multi-agency chase that ended in neighboring Salt Lake County when the SUV crashed. Converse made a last-ditch effort to flee on foot but was quickly apprehended. He was charged with 2 federal counts of bank robbery, adding to a lengthy list of prior robbery charges. At the time of the bank robberies, Harris had recently been released from jail and was serving a 4-year probation sentence for 5 armed robberies of cell phone, grocery, and hardware stores that he had pleaded guilty to less than a year earlier. The outcome of his most recent case remains to be seen. Number 21. D'Angelo and Wayne Mitchell. During a traffic stop in North Charleston, South Carolina in November of 2011, police found cocaine in a car that was occupied by 23-year-old D'Angelo Mitchell and his brother, 20-year-old Wayne Mitchell. D'Angelo, who already had a lengthy rap sheet, had more cocaine hidden in his buttocks. Worried that he could face hard time for a drug conviction, he encouraged Wayne to eat the drugs while they were being transported to jail in a police cruiser. Footage captured from inside the car showed D'Angelo digging into his pants and handing the drugs to his younger brother. He could be heard encouraging Wayne to eat and chew the cocaine. A short while later, Wayne started convulsing and bleeding from his mouth. He died from an overdose after ingesting as much as an ounce of the drug. D'Angelo Mitchell was initially released on a pending narcotics trafficking charge after posting a $50,000 bond, but authorities decided to also charge him with involuntary manslaughter after reviewing the footage from inside the police car. 2 years later, in November 2013, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to the manslaughter charge and 1 count of possession of cocaine with the intent to distribute. He was sentenced to concurrent terms of 15 years for the drug charge and just 5 years for the manslaughter charge. Number 20. Erica De Souza Vieira Nunes. In April of 2024, a woman wheeled her obviously dead uncle into a bank in Rio de Janeiro and, according to police, pretended that he was just sleeping while applying for a loan in his name. 68-year-old Paulo Roberto Braga had passed away earlier that day, and 42-year-old Erica De Souza Vieira Nunes was trying to borrow $3,250 from the bank. She could be heard telling her unresponsive uncle that he needed to sign for the loan because she couldn't sign for him while trying to force a pen in his hand. But the bank employees and other onlookers weren't fooled by the ruse. They could tell just by looking at Braga's corpse that he was dead, and staff members called the police. Nunez claimed that her uncle was alive when they entered the bank, but a medical examiner determined that Braga had died at least 2 hours earlier. Based on the settling of Braga's blood, the examiner also concluded that he had died laying down, not sitting up in his wheelchair like Nunez claimed. Nunez pleaded not guilty to theft by fraud and abusing a corpse. A lawyer released a statement maintaining the defendant's innocence and claiming that the full story about what happened was yet to come out. The investigation into the bizarre case is ongoing. Number 19. Romando Stanley. During what police in Vancouver, Washington later described as an hours-long crime spree, a suspect later identified as Romando E. Stanley was first seen stealing tools out of someone's car on a Saturday evening in April of 2024. By the time police arrived, the suspect had fled the scene. The vehicle's owner described seeing Stanley run into a nearby yard and steal a bike, which he eventually ditched while being chased by a neighbor. Stanley fled on foot, and police received a call a little while later about the same suspect stealing a cell phone from an employee at a local business and running from the scene. Officers eventually found Stanley throwing bricks onto the sidewalk from the roof of a local building. According to law enforcement, he refused to surrender at the urging of crisis negotiators and tried crossing the street on a telephone wire. He got stuck and hung perilously from the line for nearly an hour while emergency responders worked to try getting him down safely. At some point, Stanley lost his grip on the wire and landed on a fire engine that was parked beneath him to lessen his fall. He attempted to run, but was captured by police and arrested on suspicion of robbery, 2 theft counts, and malicious mischief. Number 18. Justin Carpenter. In January of 2024, a man pulled up to a Buffalo Wild Wings restaurant in Lawrence, Indiana, around midnight, looking for something to eat. The restaurant was closed, and employees were getting ready to go home, but he tried convincing them to reopen the kitchen. Police later said that the man, identified as 25-year-old Justin Carpenter, offered cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana to the workers in exchange for some fried pickles. The employees did not take Carpenter up on his offer. A manager told police that before Carpenter left the restaurant, he placed 3 bags of marijuana on the counter and said, "Give them to the kids," presumably referencing the young workers he spoke with. He was apprehended at a nearby gas station where officers found marijuana, cocaine, oxycodone, Xanax, and drug paraphernalia in his car. At the time, Carpenter was on a GPS ankle monitor while out on bail for 2 ongoing drug-related cases. Following the Buffalo Wild Wings incident, he faced even more drug-related felonies and misdemeanors. Records show that Carpenter resolved all 3 cases with a plea agreement, resulting in a 3-year suspended prison sentence and 3 years of probation. Number 17. Coleman Ferguson. Early one evening in July of 2023, a police officer spotted a Google Street View car driving at speeds of up to 120 miles per hour outside Indianapolis. Equipped with multiple cameras mounted on an antenna, the vehicle was being driven by 37-year-old Coleman Ferguson, who refused to stop for the pursuing officer. He led police on a high-speed chase into the neighboring county, where motorists driving in the opposite direction had to swerve to avoid the reckless driver as he weaved all over the road. The pursuit eventually ended when Ferguson lost control of the car, drove through a guardrail, briefly went airborne, and landed in a creek. He was promptly taken into custody and told police that he only fled because he was scared. Records showed that Ferguson had multiple prior driving-related convictions, causing some to question how he landed a job as a Google Street View driver in the first place. He ultimately pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of resisting law enforcement and received a 1-year suspended prison sentence, along with more than $3,000 in fines. Number 16. Jason Christmas. In November of 2022, a man later identified as 42-year-old Jason Christmas robbed a bank in Southfield, Michigan. Police quickly discovered that the suspect had taken an Uber to the bank and had asked the driver to wait outside for him. Unaware of the passenger's criminal intent, the driver agreed and took Christmas home when he emerged from the building a few minutes later. Upon arriving at his apartment complex, Christmas was met by members of law enforcement who promptly arrested him. He was covered in red dye from an exploding ink pack that the bank teller had slipped in with the stolen cash, and the dye-soaked money was found in the suspect's pockets. The Uber driver was cleared of any involvement in the crime, and Christmas was booked into custody on a bank robbery charge. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. Number 15. Jovan Gomez. Most criminal suspects try to conceal their actions, but there are always exceptions, including a 24-year-old Florida man named Jovan Gomez who was wearing a helmet-mounted camera as he sped recklessly through the streets of St. Petersburg on his motorcycle in January of 2024. Footage that was later uploaded to YouTube showed Gomez popping wheelies, racing through red lights, driving the wrong way, and riding on sidewalks. He eventually caught the attention of police who attempted to pull him over. In the video, Gomez could be heard yelling expletives and taunting the police while giving them the middle finger. Law enforcement failed to catch up with him, but it was only a matter of time before investigators identified him with help from acquaintances and through social media. Several weeks after the high-speed chase, Gomez was booked into the Pinellas County Jail on suspicion of felony fleeing and deluding, along with 3 misdemeanors, including racing on the highway and threatening a police officer. He appears to have posted bond, and his case is ongoing.
You hear? Yeah! She's coming!
Early on April the 12th of 2020, cries for help were heard coming from the rooftop of a Houston business, which ultimately led to the discovery of a man stuck inside a pipe. The peculiar scene unfolded on Evergreen Street near Hillcroft, where witness Oscar Ramirez initially heard the screaming. Ramirez heard the man saying somebody was texting him from inside the building. The man also said that somebody was chasing him. Ramirez subsequently called 911 and reported the incident. Upon the fire crew's arrival, it took them almost an hour and a lot of equipment to extricate the man from the pipe. He was then laid on a stretcher and taken to a hospital where he was considered to be in stable condition. In the aftermath, he was turned over to local law enforcement. According to police, the man was suspected of attempting to break into the building. Number 13. Whitney Beale. In the fall of 2015, Whitney Beale used the Periscope mobile app to live stream herself driving while intoxicated in Lakeland, Florida. During her stream, which went live on the night of October the 9th, the 23-year-old said she was driving home inebriated. At one point, Beale said she didn't realize so many people were watching her video. After Periscope users called 911 to report her, an officer logged onto the app and tried ascertaining the suspect's location. Police reportedly found Beale driving east on Carpenter's Way in a 2015 Toyota Corolla. As an officer attempted to stop her, her vehicle hit a curb. According to law enforcement, when Beale was finally apprehended, she smelled of alcohol and spoke slowly while her eyes were bloodshot. She failed a field sobriety test, and when asked by the officers to take a breathalyzer, she refused. She was arrested and booked into the Polk County Jail on a DUI charge. The next day, Beale was released on a $500 bond and later told WFLA that she made a big mistake. 4 months later, on February the 9th of 2016, Beale was handed 12 months of probation after pleading no contest to driving under the influence. She also received a 6-month license suspension and 10-day vehicle impoundment. Additionally, the young woman was ordered to serve 150 hours of community service and 10 days of weekend work release. Number 12. Eric Gerard Rivers. A bank robbery suspect in Gwinnett County, Georgia, was arrested by Lawrenceville authorities on November the 7th of 2017 after he was interviewed by a local news station. 24-year-old Eric Gerard Rivers, who was suspected of committing a spree of local bank robberies, first cased a BB&T Bank before scouting Fifth Third Bank and Fidelity Bank on Old Norcross Road. According to police, Rivers made time for an interview with WGCL-TV before heading to Chase Bank on Collins Hill Road. During the interview, he was questioned about public transit, after which he proceeded to rob the Chase Bank. Rivers slid a note to a teller indicating he was armed. He subsequently fled the scene with an unspecified amount of cash. Law enforcement believed that Rivers only succeeded in robbing 2 of the 5 banks he targeted. As police investigated the string of robberies, a bank manager told them that the suspect had walked towards the WGCL news truck after leaving the building. Meaningful developments came about after the news station was able to provide the suspect's name to investigators. Rivers was reportedly arrested at his home later that day and booked at the Gwinnett County Jail on 2 counts of robbery. Per jail records, he was released on December the 5th on a $40,000 bond. The details of Rivers' conviction and sentence were unclear, but official records revealed that he was back behind bars on September the 10th of 2018 in connection with the robberies. His estimated release date was listed as September the 10th of 2022. Number 11. Claude Vincent Griffin. During the course of a robbery on June the 3rd of 2023, a Florida man took off his cardboard mask to look at what he'd stolen, inadvertently revealing his identity. Footage of the incident, which took place at a phone repair shop in Miami Gardens, was captured by the store surveillance video at around 4 a.m. The thief smashed a glass screen and reportedly stole 19 iPhones as well as $8,000 in cash. Store owner Jeremias Berganza saw the man's face on the video and started asking around the shopping plaza where his business was located. Eventually, Berganza found out that the culprit was still in the area, drinking with others at a nearby liquor store. He contacted local police, who arrested the suspect, identified as 33-year-old Claude Vincent Griffin Jr. Later that day, jail records show that Griffin was booked into the Metro West Detention Center at approximately 9:38 p.m. The charges brought against him were grand theft, burglary, criminal offenses, cocaine possession, and resisting an officer without violence. Number 10. John E. Mogan II and Ashley K. DuBois. After serving 5 years in prison for robbery, Ohio man John E. Mogan II was accused of committing the same crime after posting selfies with wads of cash in his mouth. The alleged heist unfolded shortly before 9 a.m. on August the 24th of 2015, when the 28-year-old entered a savings bank located on State Route 752 in Asheville. The man handed a written message to one of the tellers demanding cash. After securing the money, Mogan absconded in a getaway car driven by his 24-year-old girlfriend, Ashley K. DuBois. A few days later, the couple posted pictures of themselves posing with a large sum of cash. A Central Ohio Crime Stoppers tip ultimately led to Mogan and DuBois' arrest in September. Mogan pleaded guilty to robbery and theft on December the 30th and was sentenced to 36 months in state prison. DuBois later pleaded guilty to complicity in robbery and was handed a 2-year sentence in state prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay $6,430 in restitution for the crime. Number 9. Joshua Pinney. In early 2012, a man wearing a fake goatee, a head bandage, and a neck brace walked into a branch of Bank of America in Des Moines, Washington, claiming he'd been in an accident. 30-year-old Joshua Pinney then requested a new debit card, but the branch manager was apparently suspicious and contacted law enforcement immediately. When police officers arrived, they checked the man's Oregon ID and questioned if he was being serious, as he didn't remotely resemble the man in the photo despite his elaborate disguise. Pinney responded to the officers by saying, "I know." He subsequently admitted that his brother's friend gave him the ID which was stolen. He also conceded that he hadn't been in an accident and that the neck brace was fake. In the aftermath, Pinney was charged with second-degree identity theft. He later missed a scheduled court appearance and became a wanted man, but no updates have since been provided. Number 8. McRoberts Williams. After holding up a Delaware bank for $150, a mentally unstable man immediately deposited the stolen cash into his bank account at a nearby ATM. The incident began on December the 11th of 2021 when 44-year-old McRoberts Williams from California entered the Wells Fargo Bank on Old Capitol Trail in Wilmington at around 11 a.m. Williams approached the 25-year-old female teller and gave her a note that read, "This is a robbery. I need $150. He then said he was sorry as the worker handed over the money. When Williams fled, the teller activated the emergency distress button. According to police, Williams stopped by an ATM just outside the building where he deposited the cash he'd stolen. He subsequently hid behind a nearby shopping center before local troopers found him. After his arrest, the man told the officers that he traveled to Delaware by riding on the exterior of a cargo train and that his mind had been controlled by a third party through an implant in his body. Williams was put behind bars at the Howard R. Young Correctional Institution on a $6,000 bond. He was charged with second-degree robbery. Number 7. Carly Jo Heath. After being placed on probation for DUI in February of 2014, 21-year-old Florida woman Carly Jo Heath was arrested for the same offense 2 months later. Ocala police officer Dan E. Wright, who'd taken Heath into custody the previous year, was called to Shucker's Oyster Bar about a possibly impaired driver on May the 13th of 2014. The caller said that the motorist in question was a female in a white Jeep. Upon Wright's arrival at the bar, he noticed the Jeep in the back parking lot, but no one was inside. As Wright subsequently drove away, he observed the Jeep pulling out of the lot. He followed the vehicle, which was reportedly drifting from side to side and abruptly changing lanes, before pulling into a Citgo gas station. As Wright approached the Jeep, the driver, identified as Heath, stood in the parking lot, smugly waving at him. Wright spoke with her and allegedly detected alcohol on her breath. Heath denied drinking alcohol and refused to comply with the officer's commands. She declined to perform a field sobriety test and kicked the policeman several times. Heath was then arrested and taken to the Marion County Jail, where she was released on a $12,500 bond early the next day. Among her charges were battery on law enforcement, DUI, and driver's license restriction. Heath was also accused of a probation violation. Number 6. Sean Maranzino. Suffolk County police officers were called to the Calder and Dental office on Sunrise Highway in Bayshore, New York, on the morning of March the 19th of 2019. Dispatchers had received reports of a man stuck in an air conditioning vent. Responding emergency crews dislodged the man, identified as 32-year-old Sean Maranzino. After investigating the matter, law enforcement determined that Maranzino attempted to gain access to the office through the exposed vent at around 6 a.m. He'd been stuck there for at least 3.5 hours before staff members finally discovered him. Investigators connected the man to 4 other commercial burglaries in the area that occurred a week earlier, during which he allegedly stole cash, smoking equipment, and lock boxes. The suspect was described as a former heating vent and air conditioning specialist. Ultimately, Maranzino was placed under arrest and charged with 5 counts of burglary in the 3rd degree. Number 5. Lutz Elizabeth Ray. A viral social media video showed a Texas woman attempting to feed 2 monkeys while she was inside an El Paso zoo enclosure in May of 2021. According to zoo officials, Lutz Elizabeth Ray jumped a fence, climbed through bushes, and trudged through a 4-foot-deep moat to get inside the enclosure on May the 22nd. She then attempted to feed hot Cheetos to the spider monkeys, which have been known to become violent towards humans under unfavorable circumstances. Police arrested Ray 5 days after the incident and charged her with criminal trespass. She was booked at the El Paso County Jail on a $1,500 bond. The director of the zoo spoke with ABC7, calling the woman stupid and lucky. Number 4. Robert James Rowe. In 2013, 39-year-old Australian Robert James Rowe was caught robbing his friend's store by security cameras he himself had installed 6 years earlier. The Lone Star Trading Post, located in Maryborough City, Queensland, was closed while the owners, Narelle and Wayne McKellar, were on vacation in Bali. On November the 17th of 2013, Rowe broke into the shop. He turned off the camera that covered the main section of the store and opened the front door using the keypad, which he'd installed as well. He then made off with $6,300 in cash and jewelry, but other cameras that didn't cover the main area of the shop caught him in the act. When the McKellars returned to the country, they discovered the missing cash. Narelle combed through footage for days in an effort to solve the case. One of the cameras captured a side door opening moments before Rowe was seen leaving his business card at the front door, making it appear as though he'd just arrived. Law enforcement arrested Rowe after Wayne spotted a blue plastic container that had been taken from his store on the front seat of the man's car. Wayne couldn't believe what had transpired, saying that the worst thing about it was the fact that the one responsible was his good friend. On June the 30th of 2014, Rowe was sentenced to a year behind bars in order to pay $6,300 in compensation to the McKellars. Number 3. Antoine Sims. A Georgia murder suspect with an outstanding warrant ended up in cuffs after he called 911 to complain about being served cold French fries at McDonald's. 24-year-old Antoine Sims was out on bond and wearing an ankle bracelet when he visited one of the fast food chain's locations in the city of Kennesaw with his fiancée on August 12th of 2022. When Sims received his meal at the counter, he determined that the food's temperature wasn't to his liking. He subsequently got rowdy and shouted profanities before tossing his food and drink at an employee. He then reportedly got into a verbal argument with the franchise owner, who also called 911. Sims was later kicked out of the restaurant and asked never to return. When officers arrived, they told Sims he couldn't come back to the store and asked him to sign an acknowledgement. Sims asked the officers if he was under arrest and refused to go near them to sign the document, saying, "No, I'm afraid of y'all. I just did 3 years." As an officer approached him, Sims sprinted away, triggering a foot chase. Eventually, he was tased and placed under arrest. In the aftermath, police found 31 grams of marijuana in his fiance's car. Sims was consequently charged with possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. An officer said it was very unusual that someone would call the police while knowing full well he was a wanted man. But Sims did just that. Number 2. Blakely Sands. In an attempt to get her fake ID back from a bar that had confiscated it, an Oklahoma woman called Edmond police on the night of February the 2nd of 2021. The officers responded to the bar in the 1100 block of South Broadway. They retrieved the ID card which bore the name McCamey Queen. The woman told the police that the identification belonged to her, adding that the bar staff didn't believe her. The officers subsequently asked the woman if the ID was fake, which she denied. When asked if she was sure, she said, "Yeah, I'm sure." After running the ID license number, officers determined that it belonged to a man named Robert Sanchez. The woman, ultimately identified as 18-year-old Blakely Sands, was arrested on a felony complaint of presenting a false ID to an officer to avoid prosecution. Sands was then placed behind bars at the Edmond City Jail. Number 1. Amber Lewis. 33-year-old Amber Lewis faced several criminal charges over what police labeled as an utterly ridiculous attempt to scare her cheating husband. The incident in question unfolded on the morning of April the 24th of 2019 in Millbrook, Alabama, when Lewis called authorities to report a burglary. Upon law enforcement's arrival to the 200 block of James Drive, they found Lewis and a female friend outside the home. The two claimed that they didn't know the individual who was inside. Officers soon found out that the burglary suspect was Lewis's husband. They subsequently arrested Lewis for filing a false police report. Authorities searched the residence and found marijuana, cocaine, and other drugs, some of which were in the bedroom belonging to the couple's 5-year-old child. Lewis was consequently charged with second-degree possession of marijuana and chemical endangerment of a child. She was held on a $12,500 bond at the Elmore County Jail. Her husband was also charged with drug possession, while her friend was charged with lying to police. According to Millbrook Police Chief Pete K. Johnson, the local fire department was responding to a fire at a local school at the time of the hoax call. Johnson said that resources were compromised and lives were unnecessarily placed in jeopardy as a result. Thanks for watching. Would you rather magically raise your IQ by 20 points or be given a free plastic surgery procedure of your choosing? Let us know in the comments section below.